A wife goes on a retreat for work for a few days. When she returns and enters the house, she puts her things away and then goes to do some much-needed laundry. Upon her entry to the room, however, she finds a pair of panties on the floor that do not belong to her. Furious, she questions her husband. The husband says, "I have no idea where they came from. I don't do the laundry, the maid does." The wife calms down and says, "Oh, so maybe these belong to the maid. It could be she was doing her laundry here." "Nah," said the husband musingly. "She doesn't even wear panties." A doctor and a lawyer were talking at a party. Their conversation was constantly interrupted by people describing their ailments and asking the doctor for free medical advice. After an hour of this, the exasperated doctor asked the lawyer, "What do you do to stop people from asking you for legal advice when you're out of the office?" "I give it to them," replied the lawyer, "and then I send them a bill." The doctor was shocked but agreed to give it a try. The next day, still feeling slightly guilty, the doctor prepared the bills. When he went to place them in his mailbox, he found a bill from the lawyer. A young man is vacationing in Spain, when he happens to wander into a pub populated entirely by tourists, most of whom are in the midst of playing some kind of trivia game. The young man sits down at a vacant table and listens for a while, slowly realizing that the game is focused entirely on the many hotels, motels, and hostels that dot the country. It should be pretty boring, he thinks, but he ends up becoming more and more enthralled. Finally, after the thrilling finish of a round, the now hooked traveler approaches the bartender. "Hey," he hurriedly says, "can I join the next game?" The bartender arches a bushy eyebrow. "Really? Feeling swept up in the trivia?" The young man nods. "I'm as surprised as you are, honestly. I wouldn't have expected that I'd want to play so bad." The bartender sighs and nods. "Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, son." I needed to catch a bear to complete my zoo, so I called a bear catcher. The bear catcher shows up in his truck the next day. He gets out of his truck with a feather, some rope, and a gun alongside his dog, Blue. He says that Blue is an expert bear tracker. He will find us a bear and run it up a tree. I'm going to chase the bear up. The bear catcher explains. You're going to stay down here with the gun and rope. He then continues the rest of the plan. Once I'm up in the tree, I'm going to tickle the bear with this feather. The bear is going to be so surprised by this that he's going to fall out of the tree. This is where Blue is trained to grab the groin of what falls out of the tree. The bear will be in so much pain and disarray from Blue, you'll use the rope to tie its arms. That sounds good, I say. But why do I have the gun? Well, the bear catcher started. If, in the rare occurrence that the bear pushes me out of the tree first, I'm going to need you to shoot Blue. A monkey is sitting in a tree smoking a joint when a lizard walks past. The lizard looks up and says to the monkey, "Hey, what are you doing?" The monkey says, "Smoking a joint. Come up and join me, my cold-blooded friend." So the lizard climbs up and sits next to the monkey, and they have another joint. After a while, the lizard says his mouth is dry and that he's going to get a drink from the river. At the riverbank, the lizard is so stoned that he leans too far over and falls in. A crocodile sees this and swims over to the stoned lizard, helping him to the side. He then asks the lizard, "What's the matter with you?" The lizard explains to the crocodile that he was sitting in the tree, smoking a joint with his new monkey friend. He then explained how his mouth got dry and that he was so wasted that when he went to get a drink from the river, he fell in. The inquisitive crocodile says he has to check this out. He walks into the jungle and finds the tree where the monkey is sitting, finishing a joint. He looks up and says, "Hey, monkey!" The monkey looks down and says, "Dude, how much water did you drink?" A police officer came upon a terrible wreck where the driver and passenger had been killed. As he looked upon the wreckage, a little monkey came out of the brush and hopped around the crashed car. The officer looked down at the monkey and said, "I wish you could talk." The monkey looked up at the officer and shook his head up and down. "You can understand what I'm saying?" asked the officer. Again, the monkey shook his head up and down. "Well, did you see this?" "Yes," motioned the monkey. "What happened?" The monkey pretended to have a can in his hand and turned it up by his mouth. "They were drinking?" asked the officer. "Yes." "What else?" The monkey pinched his fingers together and held them to his mouth. "They were smoking marijuana?" "Yes." "What else?" The monkey motioned, screwing. "They were screwing too?" asked the astounded officer. "Yes." "Now wait. You're saying your owners were drinking, smoking, and screwing before they wrecked?" "Yes." "What were you doing during all this?" "Driving," motioned the monkey. A young boy was at the corner of a grocery store picking out a box of laundry detergent. The grocer walked over and, trying to be friendly, asked the boy if he had a lot of laundry to do. "Oh, no laundry," the boy said. "I'm going to wash my dog." "But you shouldn't use this to wash your dog." "It's very powerful, and if you wash your dog in this, he'll get sick. In fact, it might even kill him." But the boy was not to be stopped, and carried the detergent to the counter and paid for it, even as the grocer still tried to talk him out of washing his dog. About a week later, the boy was back in the store to buy some candy. The grocer asked the boy how his dog was doing. "Oh, he died," the boy said. The grocer, trying not to be an "I told you so," said he was sorry the dog died, but added, "I tried to tell you not to use that detergent on your dog." "Well," the boy replied, "I don't think it was the detergent that killed him." "Oh? What was it then?" The boy replied, "I think it was the spin cycle." One morning, the new owner of a saloon was setting up his establishment for the day. He heard a commotion from the street and walked out to see people jumping onto their horses, climbing into buggies, or just running away. "Hey!" the owner called to one of the men. "What's going on?" "You better run, barkeep," the man replied. "Big Ed's a-coming, and can't nobody stop him from doing what he wants." Then the man spurred around and rode off. Panicked, the saloon owner ran back inside to grab his money box, but before he could leave, a huge man stepped through the door. He was 7 feet tall and 400 pounds of solid muscle, with a thick black beard and angry eyes. "Barkeep!" He slammed a hand on the bar, splintering it. "Gimme all 4 of those bottles of red-eye you got there on the shelf." Shaking with fear, the saloon owner passed the bottles over, and the giant bit the neck off every bottle before downing the contents in one swallow each. He gave a huge belch, tossed a $20 gold piece on the bar, and turned to leave. "Is there anything else you wanted?" the saloon owner asked. "Nope," said the giant. "Gotta leave, Big Ed's a-coming." A blonde in her Corvette convertible passes a policeman at high speed. He immediately flips on his lights and gives chase. She careens at a corner and knocks over a mailbox, then jumps the sidewalk, sending pedestrians scrambling for safety. She gets back onto the road and approaches a red light with traffic stopped, but swerves into the opposite lane, crossing the double yellow line, passes the stopped traffic, running the red light, and then takes a hard right turn, just missing a woman crossing with a baby stroller. Then, as she proceeds at a high speed down the next street, she suddenly sees a parking spot and makes a hard turn into it, but does not brake fast enough. She plows into the car parked ahead and sets off her airbags. The policeman finally catches up, gets out and runs to her car as she opens the door, struggling to get out from under the inflated airbags. The policeman shoves them aside and takes her by her arm to get her out when suddenly he realizes she is buck naked from head to toe. Stunned, he asks, "Why are you totally naked?" "Oh, thank God," she replies. "I thought you were going to ask me about my driving." A Mexican guy comes riding up to the border on his bicycle with 2 big sacks over his shoulders. He tells the border guard that the sacks are full of sand, but the guard doesn't believe him. The guard detains the guy and rips open the bags, but there's nothing but sand. He even has the sand analyzed, only to find that it really is just sand, and the sack is just a plain sack. 2 days later, the same thing happens. And then it happens again, 2 days after that. Every time that guy is on the bike carrying nothing but sand. This goes on for 7 years. It drives the border guard crazy. He loses his job because of it. One day, he tracks the Mexican guy down and says to him, "I'm no longer a border guard, but I have to know. What is it that you're smuggling? Because I know you're smuggling something." The bicycle guy smiles at him and says, "Bicycles, sucker." 10 years into the war, both sides ran out of bullets for their guns. They decided to use bows and arrows instead. But 10 years later, still strong in the war, both sides ran out of arrows and flint. So both sides used swords and axes. But a decade after that, both sides ran out of metal, and they had to resort to weapons made of wood, like bow staffs and nunchucks. But shortly after that, they were short on men. Luckily, one side did not draft their priests and nuns into the war, so they went to war, and the other side had never seen such devastation. However, the other side won. They did this by finding out how many nunchucks a nun can chuck if a nun can chuck nunchucks. 3 people became shipwrecked on an island inhabited by cannibals. They were swiftly captured and told they would be killed, cooked, and eaten, and their skin would be used to line the tribe's canoes, but they would be able to choose how they died. The first man, a British man, decided he wanted to die by the sword. In an instant, a tribesman cut his head off. He was then cooked, eaten, and skinned. The second man, a Frenchman, decided he wanted to be killed by the gun. He was immediately shot, and the same happened to his body. The third man, an American, said, "I'd like to be stabbed all over with a fork until I die." Puzzled, a member of the tribe began stabbing him. After about 20 minutes, the American was still clinging to life. The tribesman said, "Why? Why did you choose this way of death? We're cannibals, but even we don't like to see this kind of torture." The American looked up at the tribesman and said, "Fuck your canoes!" The day after a man lost his wife in a scuba diving accident, he was greeted by 2 grim-faced policemen at his door. "We're sorry to call on you at this hour, Mr. Wilkins, but we have some information about your wife." "Well, tell me," the man said. The policeman said, "We have some bad news, some good news, and some really great news. Which do you want to hear first?" Fearing the worst, Mr. Wilkins said, "Give me the bad news first." So the policeman said, "I'm sorry to tell you, sir, but this morning we found your wife's body in the bay." "Oh, my God," said Mr. Wilkins, overcome by emotion. Then, remembering what the policeman had said, he asked, "What's the good news?" "Well," said the policeman, "when we pulled her up, she had 2 5-pound lobsters and a dozen good-sized Dungeness crabs on her." "If that's the good news, then what's the great news?" Mr. Wilkins demanded. The policeman said, "We're going to pull her up again tomorrow morning." A chemical engineer, a mechanical engineer, and a software engineer are driving in a car when they begin down a hill and the brakes fail. The car goes faster and faster and eventually veers off the road through a guardrail, through some woods, narrowly missing numerous trees and boulders, and miraculously comes to a stop in some bushes, with no one being injured. After catching their breath, they begin trying to figure out what went wrong. The chemical engineer says, "The car was just serviced. I'll bet they put the wrong brake fluid in, and the heat in the system caused it to fail." The mechanical engineer says, "No, most likely the linkage between the brake pedal and the rest of the assembly broke." The software engineer thinks for a second and says, "Let's go back to the top of the hill and try it again." A young boy caught sight of his mother changing one day and asked her what that was that she had between her legs. "That is something you're never going to talk about again. And you shouldn't touch it either, because it has teeth." Many years went by, and the boy never touched any girl in between her legs because he was very scared. One day, however, he met the love of his life, and in time, they got married. On their wedding night, his wife asked him to touch her there. "No," he said, "it's got teeth." "Silly goose," she said. She spread her legs wide for him to see. "See? No teeth?" "Well, I'm not surprised," the man said. "Not with gums like that." A blind man went to the hospital for an eye operation. After the procedure was completed, the doctor checked on him and asked, "Can you see now?" The man shook his head and said, "No, Doc, I still can't see anything." The doctor, trying to figure out the issue, jokingly said, "Let's try something unusual." He called the nurse over and asked her to remove her clothes. "Can you see anything now?" The man paused for a moment and replied, "No, still nothing." The doctor chuckled and raised an eyebrow. "You cheater! If you can't see, why is your package waking up?" Once upon a time in a village, a man appeared and announced to the villagers that he would buy monkeys for $10 each. The villagers, seeing that there were many monkeys around, went out to the forest and started catching them. The man bought thousands at $10, and as supply started to diminish, the villagers stopped their effort. He further announced that he would now buy at $20. This renewed the efforts of the villagers, and they started catching monkeys again. Soon the supply diminished even further, and people started going back to their farms. The offer increased to $25 each, and the supply of monkeys became so little that it was an effort to even see a monkey, let alone catch it. The man now announced that he would buy monkeys at $50. However, since he had to go to the city on some business, his assistant would now buy on behalf of him. In the absence of the man, the assistant told the villagers, "Look at all these monkeys in the big cage that the man has collected. I will sell them to you at $35, and when the man returns from the city, you can sell them to him for $50 each." The villagers rounded up all their savings and bought all the monkeys. They never saw the man nor his assistant, only monkeys everywhere. Now you have a better understanding of how the cryptocurrency market works. A man walked into the ER with severe burns and blisters on both sides of his face. He was quickly admitted. The attending physician asked him, "How on earth did you burn your face so badly?" The man reluctantly began his explanation. "It's actually kind of embarrassing, Doc. See, my wife is out of town this week, and so I'm having to do my own cooking." "Ah, I see," the doctor interrupted. "You poured water on a grease fire on the stove, didn't you?" "Of course not," said the man. "How stupid do you think I am?" "My mistake," the doctor replied. "So how did you burn your face?" The embarrassed man continued, "As I was saying, my wife's out of town, and so I having to do my own cooking and cleaning." "Now I see," the doctor interjected again. "You slipped and fell face first into a scalding mop bucket. The water doesn't have to be that hot, you know." "Of course I know that. I'm not an idiot," the man explained. "And that's not what happened either." "My apologies again, sir. So how did you burn your face?" Turning red, the man started again. "As I was saying, my wife is out of town this week, and so I am having to do the cooking, cleaning, and the laundry." "Yes, I get that," the doctor exclaimed. "But how did that lead to third-degree burns on both cheeks?" "Well, see, Doc, I was ironing my clothes for work and was in quite a hurry. I had just mopped the kitchen and breakfast was burning on the stove." During all of the commotion, the phone rang. Flustered, I grabbed the iron instead of the phone and pressed it up hard and fast to my face. "I have never experienced such pain, doctor." "Oh, now I see," the doctor sympathized. "But how did you burn the other side of your face?" Puzzled, the man replied, "Well, obviously they called back." A Mexican man who spoke no English went into a department store to buy socks. He found his way to the menswear department where a young lady offered to help him. "Quiero calcetines," said the man. I don't speak Spanish, but we have some very nice suits over here, said the salesgirl. No, no quiero trajes. Quiero calcetines, said the man. Well, these shirts are on sale this week, declared the salesgirl. No, no quiero camisas. Quiero calcetines, repeated the man. I still don't know what you're trying to say. We have some fine pants on this rack, offered the salesgirl. No, no quiero pantalones. Quiero calcetines, insisted the man. These sweaters are top quality, the salesgirl probed. No, no quiero suéter. Quiero calcetines, said the man. Our undershirts are over here, fumbled the salesgirl, beginning to lose patience. No, no quiero camisetas. Quiero calcetines, the man repeated. As they passed the underwear counter, the man spotted a display of socks and happily grabbed a pair. Holding them up, he proclaimed, Eso sí que es. Why didn't you just spell it in the first place? Yelled the salesgirl. This morning, my wife was in the kitchen preparing to boil eggs for breakfast. As I walked in, she turned to me and said, You've got to make love to me this very moment. My eyes lit up and I thought, this is my lucky day. Not wanting to lose the moment, I didn't waste any time at all. I gave her a banging right on the kitchen table. Afterwards, she said, Thanks, and returned to the stove. More than a little puzzled, I asked, What was that all about? She giggled, The egg timer's broken. It was cold and pouring with rain, but the boy's mother insisted he go to the barn and feed the animals before he could have breakfast. The boy went out in a dark rage, kicked the chickens, punched the cow, and threw water all over the pigs. When he got back inside, his mother was furious. How dare you, she fumed. I saw what you did. You get no eggs because you kicked the chickens, no milk because you thumped the cow, and no bacon because of the way you treated the pigs. Just then, Dad came down the stairs and nearly tripping over the cat, he gave the animal a mighty kick. The boy turned to his mother and said, Are you going to tell him or shall I? A handsome man in a suit approaches a young lady at a bar and asks if he can buy her a drink. Don't you have a girlfriend? She asked. Guys like you always have girlfriends. He looked downcast. No. Sadly, we broke up just over a month ago. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, she said. Okay then. I'll have a white wine, please. One glass of wine led to a second. A few drinks later, after a kiss and a cuddle, they headed off back to her place and made passionate love. While he was putting his clothes back on, she said, So you're good-looking, a nice guy, and amazing in bed. Can I ask why on earth you split with your girlfriend? He said, My wife found out. One day while on patrol, a police officer pulled over a car for speeding. He went up to the car and asked the driver to roll down her window. The first thing he noticed, besides the nice red sports car, was how hot the driver was. Blue eyes, blonde, the works. I've pulled you over for speeding, ma'am. Could I see your driver's license? What's a license? Replied the blonde, instantly giving away the fact that she was as dumb as a stump. It's usually in your wallet, replied the officer. After fumbling for a few minutes, the driver managed to find it. Now may I see your registration? Asked the cop. Registration? What's that? Asked the blonde. It's usually in your glove compartment, said the cop impatiently. After some more fumbling, she found the registration. I'll be back in a minute, said the cop and walked back to his car. The officer called in to the dispatch to run a check on the woman's license and registration. After a few moments, the dispatcher came back. Is this woman driving a red sports car? Yes, replied the officer. Is she a drop-dead gorgeous blonde? Asked the dispatcher. Yes, replied the cop. Here's what you do, said the dispatcher. Give her the stuff back and drop your pants. What? I can't do that. It's inappropriate, exclaimed the cop. Trust me, just do it, said the dispatcher, a smile in his voice. So the cop goes back to the car, gives back the license and registration, and drops his pants, just as the dispatcher said. The blonde looks down and sighs. Oh no, not another breathalyzer. In a little town in Ireland, there's a well-known mental institution with an unusual tradition. Each year, the doctors select 2 patients who seem the most improved. If they can answer 2 simple questions correctly, they're declared sane and released back into the world. This year, it was Patty and Mike. The orderly brought them to the waiting area. A few minutes later, the doctor called Patty into the office first. "Patty," he said, smiling behind his glasses, "you know the rules. 2 questions. Get them right. You're free to go. Ready?" Patty nodded. "All right then. Question 1. If I poked out one of your eyes, what would you be?" "I'd be half blind," she answered confidently. "Correct. Now if I poked out your other eye, what would you be?" Patty sat tall and said, "I'd be completely blind, of course." "Excellent," the doctor said, impressed. "You may wait outside while I prepare your release." Excited, Patty returned to the waiting room and whispered to Mike, "They're gonna ask about your eyes. Just say you'd be half blind with one out and fully blind with both gone." Moments later, the doctor called Mike in and sat him down. "Mike," he said, "same rules apply. You answer 2 questions correctly, and you're free." Mike gave a thumbs up. First question, what would happen if I cut off your right ear? Mike proudly answered, "I'd be half blind." The doctor paused. "Okay. And if I cut off your left ear?" Mike beamed. "I'd be completely blind." At this point, the doctor leaned forward, confused. "Mike, how do you figure that?" Mike looked him dead in the eye and said, "'Cause my hat would fall down over my eyes." A young couple had just gotten married, and they spent their wedding night doing what most newlyweds do, celebrating their love again and again, all night long. The next morning, the husband hopped in the shower while his new bride relaxed in bed. When he finished, he realized he had forgotten to grab a towel. "Sweetheart," he called out, "can you bring me a towel, please?" She walked over to the bathroom with the towel in hand. When he opened the door to take it, there he stood, dripping wet and completely exposed. Her eyes widened as she glanced down, then back up, then back down, and stopped halfway. With a puzzled look, she pointed and asked, "Wait, what's that?" He hesitated, slightly embarrassed, and replied, "That's what we had so much fun with last night." She paused, looked even more confused, and asked innocently, "Oh, is that all that's left?" Lisa couldn't believe her eyes when she walked through the door after work. The kids were freshly bathed, dinner was simmering on the stove, the table was set, and she even heard the washer and dryer running. It looked like a commercial for the perfect family night. Her husband, Dave, usually more of a "that's not my job" kind of guy, was wiping down the kitchen counters like a pro. Suspicious, Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Okay, what's going on?" Turns out Dave had read an article that said women who work full-time and still do all the housework are often too exhausted for anything romantic at night. So Dave, thinking he was solving his problem, took over the chores for once. The evening was smooth, stress-free, and honestly kind of magical. The next day, Lisa told her friends at the office all about it. He cooked, cleaned, helped the kids with their homework, even folded the laundry. It was like living in a dream. One of them grinned and asked, "Sounds amazing. And how was the rest of the night?" Lisa smiled, shrugged, and said, "Oh, that? He was too tired." The police department, the FBI, and the CIA are all trying to prove that they are the best at apprehending criminals. The president decides to give them a test. He releases a rabbit into a forest, and each of them has to catch it. The police go in. They place animal informants throughout the forest. They question all plant and mineral witnesses. After 3 months of extensive investigations, they conclude that rabbits do not exist. The FBI goes in. After 2 weeks with no leads, they burn the forest, killing everything in it, including the rabbit, and they make no apologies. The rabbit had it coming. The CIA goes in. They come out 2 hours later with a badly beaten bear. The bear is yelling, "Okay, okay, I'm a rabbit, I'm a rabbit."